Hello all, I'm Sai and in today's video, I'm bringing to you my 2024 book bingo wrap-up. I announced a book bingo in the beginning of the year and there were totally 25 prompts. There is still time to complete the book bingo if you're still reading through the prompts. I think the rule was to read 25 books if you could, and if not, you can use a maximum of 3 prompts per book. I ended up taking only 1 prompt per book and I ended up finishing 25 books in the past 11 months. And in this video, I'm just going to talk to you guys about all those books. Some of these you might have heard from me in the wrap-ups before, some of them in individual reviews, and some of them straight out here only. I'm planning to do the same for 2025 too. So if you have any ideas for the book bingo that I'm to announce for 2025, please do let me know those in the comments below because I'm always open to get ideas from you guys. So without any further ado, let's get into the books right away. Prompt number 1 is to read a book with a trans main character, and for this one I went with Felix Ever After by Kacen Calender. I think I read this far back in January or February and it was such an amazing book, okay? It is YA, so anyone who's like 13 or 14 and older can definitely go forward and read the book because it is really well written. Personally, I have not read that many books with trans main characters. I know that there are main characters who are trans in multiple books, both in YA as well as adult, but I've not read as many. So I wanted to include this as a prompt, and I think this book was a great pick for it because the voice of the main character in this one was really good. I think I have read another book by this author, but I'm not sure though. I went into this with pretty high expectations because I've heard really good things about the book. Now here we follow Felix, who's a trans teen boy and he's in the final year of his high school. He wants to pursue an arts degree and he's working hard for it. There are also some other people in his own class itself who are quite more privileged than he is. While dealing with all this, he's also cyberbullied in a way because of a person who leaks his dead name, that is before his transition, on the internet, and it becomes kind of a problem for him. The author has tackled all these things really well in the plot, and the character development of the main character as well as the friends who support him are wonderfully done by the author here. So this was the book for the first prompt. Prompt number 2 is to read a graphic novel, and for this one I read Super Boba Cafe by Nidhi Chanani. I had already read one other graphic novel by this author last year and I quite liked it. It was Jukebox, and I think this book was published only later last year, that is the last quarter or so of 2023. And the only reason why I wanted to read this book is because it is about boba. So here we follow our main character who's this younger teen and she goes to her grandmother's house for a vacation because again she's been cyberbullied because of certain things that happened in her high school, and she's to spend her vacation with her grandmother in her house, just both of them together. Her grandmother owns this boba cafe and the whole ambience of the graphic novel is very cozy. It also has kind of a middle grade element to it because we have a monster inside the story, and as a whole I can say that it was a solid read. The artwork was really beautiful, and if you want a quick read which is also really nice and cozy to read, especially during this season, I'd highly suggest you to try this one. So Super Boba Cafe is the graphic novel that I read. Prompt number 3 is to read a translated book, and for this one I went with a translated book from Japanese into English, and it is also a book which has been quite popular this year, which is The Lantern of Lost Memories by Sanaka Hiiragi. Now the basic concept of this book is that anyone who dies is caught in between this place between life and death, where there is this person who creates like a small clip or collage or a slideshow of the very significant moments from the person who's dead and their life. And the person who's dead and get into the other side of the world gets to experience their life by seeing certain snapshots from their own life. This gave me the same kind of vibes as Before the Coffee Gets Cold, but both of these stories are definitely very different from each other. It is magical realism and it has that really good feel that Japanese fiction usually has. I enjoyed reading this one, and it was kind of an emotional book too because there are so many things that happen. I think we follow like 2 to 3 stories of 2 to 3 different characters who are experiencing the same thing happening to them after their death, and how they see their life and how they get to look back at their life literally and see all the things and experience all the things that have happened to them in the past. The writing is also quite easy to follow, and it is a very short book if I'm not wrong. I think the audiobook was not even 5 hours long, so I was able to finish it in just one sitting in 2 times speed. So this is definitely a good book. I'd recommend everyone to give a try. The next prompt is to read a book on productivity, and for this one I went with Time is Not Infinite by Paulo Ruggeri. Now this was a Kindle ebook that I got for free in Kindle, and I ended up reading that one. And I think it has nearly 12 chapters or so, and each and every one of the chapters is very short. The author basically tries to show us where all we are losing our time and how we can take it out and put it into use where it is actually necessary to make our life better. And if you're a beginner who's not read any productivity books before, I'd suggest you to try this one because it is very easy to follow, it is very easy to read, and each and every one of the chapters is basically like a summary of some of the huge books which deal with each and every single chapter as a whole topic itself, and it is even under 100 pages long, so it will not even take that much time for you to read. I think I read it over like 2 days before I went to sleep or so, and it was definitely useful. And I am using certain things that the author talks about in that book, and it helps me to see where I am losing my time, even without my knowledge. So that's definitely a good book on productivity. Prompt number 5 is to read a personal finance book, and for this one, I went with an Indian personal finance book, which is Let's Talk Money by Monika Halan. This book was amazing, okay? I did not have really great expectations or anything for this one, but once I started reading it, I was able to learn so many things, okay? It just shows you how you can build your savings from the scratch and how you can plan your future really, really easily. It's not going to be easy to start with, but once you learn the concepts that the author is explaining to you in really, really simple terms, I'm definitely sure that anyone can get a grasp of this book and put it into practice very easily. I think I read it in the first quarter of the year during March or April, and my goal was to read just 5 to 10 pages of the book per day, and I ended up finishing it in like 2 to 3 weeks. You can see the number of tabs that I put in here, right? Because it has so much information. I can just flip through it and show you all the things that I learned, because the author's writing style is very, very easy to understand. It is quite empathetic, if you ask me, because she has not written this book only for high class people, okay? It is for everyone who's struggling with their money and not being able to make more out of the money that they already have. Also, while reading the book, I was able to identify some of the healthy practices that I have when it comes to my personal finance, and also some unhealthy things which I'm continuously doing that are quite deteriorating my wealth. If you're like 15, 16 and above, this is definitely one book you can go forward and read with your total trust, because it is worth each and every word. There's no beating around the bush, there's no flowery writing, there's no, the usual crap that people talk about money. It is very understandable, super easy to read, and also easily one of the best books that I've read in 2024. The next prompt is to read a book with a bookish title, and by bookish title I mean the title of the book should have something related to books, okay? It can have the word words, it can have the word books, it can have the word bookshop, like I have right now. It can have anything as a word on the title that can even remotely connect you with books, and it must be something personal to you. So for me, this book was personal, at least in terms of the title, and it is The Village Grain Bookshop by Rachel Lucas. I don't think I have talked about this book that much because it was in a very, very recent wrap up. I think I finished reading it in November only. And this is also one book which you can sit down and finish in just a single day itself, because it moves really smooth, okay? Here we follow our main character Hannah, and she's a housewife. She takes care of her son who's a teenager and her husband who's a huge workaholic. Once she gets this opportunity to own this bookshop that is somewhat along with a post office in a small village from her cousin, and she takes that opportunity, as well as, she takes her family from this huge locality in London to this very small village. And they are also quite accommodating to it. What all happens in Hannah's life after they move there, and how she tries to change her life in the way that she wants to live it, is the plot of this book. The bookshop and bookish elements of the book are not huge though, but it is definitely a cozy small town book. If you're a person who likes series like Schitt's Creek, I think this will be a book you will definitely enjoy. I quite enjoyed it, and it delivers the same kind of coziness that the book's cover represents. Next, we have a non-fiction book related to mental health, and for this one, I went with How to Be the Love You Seek by Dr. Nicole LePera, who's definitely one of my favorite non-fiction authors, especially within this particular genre of non-fiction, which is related to mental health, because she's a therapist herself, and the approach that she has towards therapy is not just related with the mind. It relates with your body, your mind, your past, how you live your life right now, your spiritual practices, whether you take care of yourself or not, and all such stuff. So in this book, she basically talks about why we crave for the kind of love that we crave from other people, and how we can give it to ourselves, and how by giving it to ourselves, we'll start getting it from other people also. Now, this is a book which I can say that of all the 3 or 4 books that are written by the author, is a really good blend or mix between both science as well as spirituality. She shows us the spiritual concept and how well it is known across the world, and backs it up with scientific evidence, which I felt was very interesting, because most of the things that the author talks about here in terms of science behind the spiritual practices that are taught in the name of manifestation right now were not known by me. I'm very much into manifesting, so when the book actually dealt with that specific topic, or that portion of life in a spiritual way, but also backing it with science, it felt very refreshing for me. So if you're someone who's trying to romanticize your life more, either just yourself or with the people around you, this is definitely a book that you can go forward and read, but it will not be an easy read. It will take quite a bit of your time. It will take some kind of mental bandwidth from you, because it will start excavating things that you have buried in your mind, so that you can take them out, start healing them, and then become a better version of yourself. So this is the non-fiction book related to mental health which I read. The next prompt is to read a book with an elderly main character. And for this also, I'm going with a very recent read of mine. I finished reading it this November only, and it took me like so long to read the first 70 to 80 pages of the book, and the rest of the book I just finished in one single day because I was not able to put it down again. It is also super funny. Okay, the book is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Here we follow a cast of 4 characters called the Thursday Murder Club, and all of these 4 people are senior citizens who are living in an old age home in England. They have this club called the Thursday Murder Club, during which they meet every Thursday and discuss some cold cases which have not been solved. During that time, a murder happens in their residence or campus, and they are trying to solve that murder. It is very, very funny. It is super witty. And the kind of humor that elderly people have is really beautifully shown to us here. They are also quite snappy and, cunning at times, which I enjoyed throughout. So yeah, The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman is the book which I read that had an elderly person as a main character, but it is not just one main character. The entire main character cast of this book is composed of elderly people only. The next prompt is to read a book that is under 100 pages long, and for this one, I went with a short story, which is The Cleaners by Ken Liu. Now, this is the first book that I've read by this author, and I'm very glad that it was a short story because with the small amount of pages that he had, he just explored the world in such a great way. Okay, I cannot say that the work was that great or anything because it's just a short story, but the way in which he showed the world within such short pages for this book was really good. Now, the thing about this book is, each and every person who dies or lives in a world, they have this tendency to leave off their memories on everything that is surrounding them. And our main character whom we see here is a cleaner that actually cleans up the memories from the things of dead people and makes the articles which have been deposited with the memories pure so that they can be used by other people who are to, inherit them also. It was so fascinating. It was very, very unique. And I also read it for free in Prime Reading. If you want to read a nice, thick short story that is very tense and really well written, I'd suggest you to try this one. So, The Cleaners by Ken Liu is the book which is under 100 pages that I read. The next prompt is to read a standalone fantasy book. And for this one, I read A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by Kingfisher. I started listening to this book last year in December, but for some reason, I was not able to connect with the story, even though it was good. And I had to DN up the book softly back then. So again, what I did is somewhere during August or September, I went forward and started listening to the audiobook from the start. And I finished the entire audiobook in just one day or so because it was so much fun. Okay. The thing about Kingfisher's books is that they have this very dark setting, but the way in which everyone behaves in the world is super funny and it is very, very cozy to read. It is kind of like, a dark, cozy fantasy for me. And I have 2 of their books in this bingo card. So this is the first book, which is a standalone fantasy. You can read this and not be committed to a series. In this world, what actually happens is many people have magic and the magic can be anything. Our main character here has the ability to do magic with baking stuff, and because of that, everything that she bakes is very nice, very unique, very good and very tasty too. She also has the ability to give life to these baked stuff and make them obey her orders. It is such a creative magic, and the way in which the author makes use of it throughout the story is really, really interesting. I cannot say that the ending of the book is that great or anything, but the journey through which it takes us and the way in which the author chooses to use the magic system or the magical ability of the main character here is really, really sweet to read. So if you want a standalone fantasy which is not difficult to read, which is very, very chill and does not have that many high stakes, you should definitely try reading A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by Kingfisher. The next prompt is to read a thriller book, and I had to do this because I don't read that many thrillers. So I went forward and finished reading this prompt in January itself, and I think I read the book in the first week of the year itself. The book is The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I know that Lisa Jewell is super popular with her thriller books, and I have not read anything else by her before this one. This was my first book and it was really nice, okay? It had that very dark, eerie vibe going on. At the same time, it did not feel like that thrilling also to me because, of course, there's a murder mystery which we are solving from years back, but there was not this feel of urgency and, if this is not done right, someone is going to die. I did not have that kind of feel while I was reading the thriller. It was quite mellow the whole time, even though the story is quite dark in its tone. It talks about, a cult culture that is followed inside the small family inside the book, how it affects an entire family, how it affects the children inside the family and so many other such things. The exploration of the different stuff in the book was good, but as a whole, it was not that power-packed a package for me. So yeah, The Family Upstairs was the thriller that I read for the prompt. The next prompt is to read a biography, autobiography or a memoir. And for this one, I went with a medical memoir and it is also a cancer memoir. I read this in November only. Again, this is one book which I started reading in December last year. It was quite heavy for me to read back then, so I just DNF'd it and finally picked up reading the book along with the audiobook. And this is definitely a very difficult to handle, okay? So all the trigger warnings that are related to cancer are there for this book because it deals with people who actually battled cancer in their real life and did not win. They ended up dying. The book is The First Cell by Azra Raza. The author here talks about the various patients whom she had treated who were affected by cancer, and not even one of the cases that she talks about in this book are of people who survived cancer. It either got worse and they died, or it relapsed after some years and they ended up dying again. And all of these people are shown to have lived really big lives. Okay, they are not normal people who have not tried that many things in their life. They are people who have tried very hard, and despite trying very hard to do whatever they want in life, this one disease ended up just subsuming their life as a whole. It was quite a heavy, dark, and sad book for me to read. But I think many people need to read this because it will make us aware of how cancer can be prevented if it is, diagnosed much earlier in stages compared to how it is diagnosed in later stages and, starts up consuming the person organ by organ. So yeah, it was quite heavy to read, but definitely an amazing book. Has all the trigger warnings related to cancer. But if you're someone who's interested in knowing about this stuff, if you want the knowledge about that stuff, definitely one book you need to read. Next, we have an Indian series as the prompt, and for this one, I went with a graphic novel or illustrated book series. It's more like an illustrated book series than a graphic novel series, and it is The Incantations Over Water and Mermaids in the Moonlight series by Sharanya Manivannan. Now, this is an adult book, and this one's a middle grade book, so that's the difference between the two books inside the series. You cannot put both of them together in any category. If you're an adult, obviously you can read both of these, but in order to read this one, you should be an adult only because it deals with quite strong topics. Okay, I'm not saying they are bad in any way, but they are quite strong. If a younger person reads them, I think it will be difficult for them to digest. And the language of this book is definitely confusing. There are multiple pages inside the book where I could not understand what I was reading from the first time. I had to go back, read it again, and then get an idea of what the author was trying to say because it is quite poetic in its tone. And this one, Mermaids in the Moonlight, is just a collection of folklore and tales from different parts of the world where mermaid lore is present and how they are presented to the people there. So both of these together comprise the Indian series which I read, Incantations Over Water and Mermaids in the Moonlight by Sharanya Manivannan. Prompt number 14, I think, is the next one, and it is to read an illustrated book. And for this one, again, I went with an Indian illustrated book. It is also very short. The book is Coral Woman by Lubaina Bandhukwala. Now, this is a very easy book to read. Okay, it talks about a woman named Priya who's very much interested in coral reefs and what all she has done in her life to know more about them, spread the knowledge about coral reefs to the people in the world and also preserve them. This is actually the real life story of this woman, and it is written in a way that is very comfortable for children to read. So if you're an adult and looking for something, kind of classy, this is not a book for you, but you can definitely go forward and read it to your children or present it to some kids that you know and may want to read. The illustrations inside the book are really gorgeous. I just love them totally. I think I can just show you like one or two. They are very beautiful, and I ended up reading the entire book in just one sitting itself, and I ended up looking at the illustrations for longer than I read the book because they are very pretty. It also gives you kind of a knowledge of the aquatic life about our country and how certain actions that we are doing in different parts of our country, different states of our country is actually ruining that biodiversity. So Coral Women by Lubaina Bandhukwala is the illustrated book that I read. Prompt number 15 was to read a book with an Indian main character, and for this one I went with an Indian romance book which is The Perfect Us by Durjoy Datta. And this was my book club pick for February, okay, for Valentine's Day. And it was a huge mistake. I hated this book, did not like anything about it. The first third of the book had me, but the second and third thirds of the book were definitely not worth reading. I have made an entire discussion review video for this book. I link it down in the description and also in the Kacen Calendar space. If you want to hear me rumble more about this book, definitely go forward and check that video because this book is not worth it. Please don't read it if you have any plans to, because it is just unwanted trauma just written over and over again. Prompt number 16 is to read a used book, okay? This can be any book, but it should be from a used copy. And for this one, I went with Landline by Rowell. I don't have the book now with me. I unhauled it. It's not that the book was bad or anything, but it is not something that I'm going to go back and reread. And it is also a standalone contemporary book, okay? It has kind of a magical realism element here, which is the main character here. She's very focused on her work, and her husband and children are in her mother's house, I think, during the holidays, and she ends up making a call to her mother's home. Okay, the main character ends up making a call to her mother's home, and instead of the people who are there picking it up, her lover from her high school life ends up picking the phone, and it is not him in this age. Okay, it is him from when he was a teenager and when she was a teenager, and from there the story just unfolds. You can definitely read this during the December and January kind of time period because it is suitable for that kind of weather, at least for us here in India. It has that touch of magical realism, as I said, but definitely not a story that I'm going to remember for a longer time. So yeah, this is the book that I read as a used copy. Prompt number 17 is to read an Indian mythology or mythological fiction book, for which I went with a mythological fiction book, and I think this is the best mythological fiction that I've read so far this year. and it is obviously Asura by Anand Neelakantan, which was my first book club pick of the year for January. I started off very strong with this book, and the next month itself I read The Perfect Us and ruined the book club. But I did not stop it, okay? I have gone on till November and I'm going to finish the year good. So this was the first book club pick for the year, and it was super powerfully. Okay, it is no other book that is perfect for beginners if you ask me. It has certain things which are overwhelming to read. I can say that the first 100 pages or so of the book are quite difficult to get through because there's a lot of info dumping. But after that, you just start to understand the main character of the book, Ravana here, and how he is actually the main character of his own story. How he is not, purely the evil that is made out to be in most of the versions of the Ramayana. It was definitely a very different lens to see the Ramayana through, and it is easily not one book that I'm going to forget anytime soon. You can see the number of tabs I put in here. I also ended up painting the edges of the book yellow. So Asura by Anand Neelakantan is the mythological fiction book that I read for the prompt. Next, we have prompt number 18, which is to read a book with a child as a main character. And the main character here should be under 14 years in age, for which I went with an entire series, which is a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snickett. And I listened to the audiobook of this entire series, except the 7th book inside the series. Okay, here we deal with 3 siblings, all of whom are under 14 years in age when the series starts. So I have read at least one book in which the main character is under 14 years in age. Their parents end up dying in a fire of their house. And after that, the children are given into the care of different people who end up not treating the children well at all. It is quite a difficult series to read because of seeing bad things happening to children, but it is also, kind of a template series. Okay, each and every book is like they are put into a wrong house. The person who's taking care of them is a bad person. They try to escape from them. They escape from them and go get stuck with another person. That's the thing which keeps on happening throughout the 13 books inside the series. It's definitely really nice for children to read, but if you're an adult, I don't think we can enjoy it that much because it's kind of targeted towards children. And it is childish because of that. So this is the entire series which I read with a child as the main character. Prompt number 19 is to read a book which is over 600 pages long. And for this one, I went with such a fun book. Okay, and it is A Coat of Wings and Ruin by Sarojini Maas, which for me is the last book inside the Avatar series. I did read until A Coat of Silver Flames, but I think the 4th and 5th books inside the series are not necessary. I did not like A Coat of Silver Flames and ended up unhauling the book. I have the other 4 books in the series with me, but this is the one in this edition which is over 600 pages long, so I went with this one. I'm sure you know about A Coat of Thorns and Roses series, and for me the second book is still my most favorite. Even though I rated both of these around 4.5 or 4.75 stars. The best thing about this series for me is that even though the books are like huge beasts like themselves, they are so easy to read. Okay, they move very fast, the world building is beautiful, the romance is just nice, and the main character growth, if you ask me, of all these Sarojini Maas books that I've read so far, is the best in the series. I just love Farah as the main character because she goes through so much beautiful growth inside the 3 books that I've read inside the series. So A Coat of Wings and Ruin is the book which I read that had more than 600 pages. Prompt number 20 was to read a new release book from 2024. I listened to the audiobook of this one, which is What Feasts at Night by Kingfisher. I also read the other book inside the series, which is What Moves It by the same author. I think that book was published last year and this one this year. This was published early this year and I read it in the first half of the year itself. They are both novellas under like 3 or 4 hours long in audiobook format. I finished listening to both of them in one sitting each. In the series, what basically happens is we have this soldier who has gone through great trauma in a war. And they are just trying to live their life happily and comfortably right now, but they have extreme PTSD, which just keeps on popping up throughout the 2 books inside the series. How they deal with this, as well as the main plot of both of these books, is the plot of the series. It is handled really well by the author. The genre for both of these books is horror, but it feels like horror fantasy to me. Definitely a good series that I read last year. And if you want to read a very different fantasy series or a really good horror series with very short books, I suggest you to try both of these, which are What Moves the Dead and What Feasts at Night. The next prompt is to read either an ebook or listen to an audiobook. For this one, I went with an ebook because I tend to listen to a lot of audiobooks even without this font, and I tend to read a little bit less of ebooks. So the book which I read for this prompt is My Hanuman Chalisa by Devdutt Patnaik, which is an Indian anthology book in which the author talks about his own understanding of the Hanuman Chalisa from his own point of view. It was really nice to read, and I think I read this book over a month every night before bed. It was really nice, even as a spiritual practice for me, to read about Hanuman and the author's understanding of his super popular song or verses that we use to pray to him. and then go to bed. It gave me a really good understanding of the Hanuman Chalisa because I listen to it almost each and every day in the morning. And if you're someone who's interested in reading Indian mythology book, especially non-fiction, I'd suggest you to try this one. The best thing about Devdutt Patnaik's books is that he has his own approach of explaining the mythology to us from a philosophical point of view rather than just, as a story. He did the same with this book too, and I definitely enjoyed reading it. So this is the ebook which I read. The next prompt is to read a classic, and for this one, I go with a children's classic which I read, and it is Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. Now, the main reason why I picked up this book is because of Sushmita from Read with Sushmita, which is her channel. She is a very big fan of this author, and I personally don't read that many classics. I have said that very many times in the channel already. And when I was injured and in bed this year, in August, I just wanted to read as much as I can because I was not able to move around. So I picked up this book from my shelf because it has been sitting on my shelf for over a year and a half now. And in the beginning, it was quite annoying for me because the main character Anne in this book is an orphan and she's accidentally adopted by these two parents who end up bringing her up too. Now, Anne's point of view towards life is super positive and optimistic because it has to be so for her because she has no one else in the world, right? She's trying to make the best of all the situations that she's put in and see the good in things that are happening around her. It was very annoying for me in the beginning, but as the story progressed, I was able to understand her as a character very much more. And I started appreciating her appreciation for life and all the small good things that happened there to such a great extent. It even motivated me to just take my injury during that time as a good thing and just move on with all the positive things that were happening around me, appreciate my family a lot more, appreciate the job that I have a lot more, and all the privileges that I don't pay that much attention to. This was definitely not a book on my list during the beginning of the year, but because of this prompt and because of Sushmita, I ended up picking the book. I ended up picking up the book, and it was definitely worth each and every minute I spent reading. The next prompt was to read a book which is older than you, okay? A book which is older than me is The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski, which is the first book or first set of short stories inside the Witcher series. I started reading the Witcher series in the beginning of the year in Jan with this book. I read the second collection of short stories also right after this one. But after that, I did not read the first book inside the main series for a very long time. I think I read it just 1 or 2 months back, and I'm not going to finish reading the series this year. That is very evident now for me. By far, I can say that Ciri and Yennefer are my total favorite characters, and I definitely do love Geralt too. I can't wait to finish reading the series as a whole and then watch the Netflix series so that, I'm caught up with all the stuff. So yeah, The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski is one book which is older than me that I read for this prompt. Prompt number 24 is to read a book written in verse, and for this one I went with Blood Moon by Lucy Kathiou. This is also a very recent read of mine, just from November I think. Here we follow the story of our main character who's not that popular in school but her friend is, and one day what happens is when she is having one of her first sexual experiences, our main character here starts menstruating all of a sudden. Even though it's just blood, it becomes kind of this huge deal on the internet too because of certain horrible things that happen. How she handles that, how she has the adults around her supporting her and her friends supporting her in their own way is the plot of this book. It is quite dark to read at the instances, and it also has quite a number of trigger warnings too. The story also has a pedophile who's a teacher inside the book, which are all things that you have to keep in mind if you're going to read the story. But as a whole, it was something which was a very quick read but also super effective. So this is the book which I read written in verse. And the final and last prompt inside the bingo card, prompt number 25, is to do immersive reading for a book, which is you have to listen to the audiobook and follow up with the physical copy. And for this one, I went with a huge book, which also I think is going to be my most loved book of the year. I cannot say that this is my favorite, but this is easily by far the best book that I've read so far in 2024. We just have a half a month left. I don't think anything is going to top this book. And it's also a hugely sad book, which is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I have a dedicated review of this book and tips to read it if you're planning to read it because it's easily the saddest book that I've read. It's also the one book which I read has all the trigger warnings that I can think of. It is also a huge mammoth. I'm very sure that if I had physically read this book, I could not have gotten past the midpoint because very terrible things happen. Okay, that's all I can say. That's all I can say without getting pretty much emotional about this book because it is a book which will tear your heart apart because it talks about stuff that is happening to so many people around the world. So yeah, if you're going to read this book, just read through all the trigger warnings and then read the book. Take as much time as you want. Read it during the summer only. Don't read it when it is cloudy or raining out there because you don't want to, put yourself into a depression. Having said all those things, the best book that I read so far this year, and I believe it is going to remain the same even after December is over. So yeah, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara is the book for which I did immersive reading. So yes guys, those are all the 25 books which I read for my book bingo for 2024. If you have finished the book bingo and if you had participated in the bingo this year, please do let me know down in the comments what all you read. It doesn't matter whether you finished crossing all the bingo card or not. If you manage to read at least a few books with the prompts that I've given in the card, it is just great. And if you have any more ideas for 2025, please do let me know that also down in the comments, because as I said before, I'm open to ideas and suggestions from you guys. And I hope you got some good recommendations from this video too. If you did enjoy watching today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.